Hi, I'm Christina. I'm the CFO of New Energy Nexus, and this presentation is for startups who are thinking about taking on debt for the very, very first time. There will be so much more to research and to know after you've gone through this presentation, so this is really just a first teaser. I should also say that venture debt may even have more nuances than commercial debt, so I'm focusing here on more commercial debt, bank debt, classic debt product. If you're thinking about venture debt, you should talk to your investors and also get more educated with a potential venture debt provider. There is a lot of literature out there on the web to get familiar with venture debt. So these are really just the basics of commercial debt. So, very high level, what's the difference between debt and equity? So, the cost of debt is generally defined because that's really the interest rate. And above and beyond the interest rate, the creditor, so the counterparty of your debt, does not get to share in any of your upside or any of your profits. So it's bound. Whereas your equity investors generally have some kind of arrangement that the more success you have, the better off they are. So that's point one for debt. The next item for debt is predictability. The more predictability you have, the more likely it is that debt is a good fit for you. So, for example, you're manufacturing a product and you need to buy components, and you're very certain that once you're going through your manufacturing process with your financed components, you will have solid sales in the future. So those sales get you cash flows, and those cash flows allow you to pay back for the portion of sales that's attributable to the components that you borrowed from. That's a good case. Even better if you can already lock in those sales, and then purchasing those components is just the final step to deliver on those sales. In that case, debt, and the more predictable all this is with delivery on time and without defects, then debt is a really good choice. Another scenario, if you have fixed assets or physical assets that are valuable in your manufacturing process and therefore provide value over time as part of your sales revenue, or you realize that as part of your sales revenue, then putting up that valuable machinery or physical asset as collateral to finance a loan, and then over time pay back that debt with the income generated from your sales, that's also a good case. Last but not least, you want to be in general agreement with your investors depending on your capitalization structures. If you have large investors, powerful investors, and they disagree that you take on debt, that's probably something you want to align on before you take on debt. So then the question, what are the risks for taking on debt and why it might not be a good idea? So you have to understand that the obligation to repay the debt remains in place even if things go wrong. Sometimes there's room to renegotiate repayment timelines, but generally that's already a pretty bad story. The headline is the obligation remains yours to pay. So if your manufacturing line totally breaks down for a couple of months, you still have to make the debt repayment on schedule, even though you might not have realized those sales that you were hoping for. So just keep that in mind. It's very hard to get out from debt obligation. The second point is that you're making a decision now about certain flexibility in the future because you're committing certain parts of your sales revenue for the repayment of the debt. That means you can't use those cash flow streams to pivot your company, to invest in R&D, to launch a new product, all those kind of things. That's just a big point of awareness that it limits your flexibility versus your status quo potentially. And lastly, you should be aware that most debt comes with what they're called covenants. So those are conditions that might hamper your flexibility otherwise. So it might not allow you to do free financing rounds. It might not allow you to take on other debt. It might want some information rights. So you just need to be aware what conditions you're signing up for when you take on debt. So let's assume you have decided you're going to approach a lender for possibly getting debt. you should get ready for a couple of questions. So questions, as you can imagine from the prior slides, the question about customers. Do you have customers from which you generate sales? If the answer is no and nowhere in sight, you're probably not going to progress a whole lot further. Then they're going to ask you about predictable cash flows in and out and whether you know how to manage them. And very related to that is, do you have a financial model that can predict those inflows and outflows, and probably also whether you do an actuals to forecast analysis at periodic intervals to test how good you are at forecasting your cash flows. And then last but not least, they're going to indirectly ask whether you've got impeccable record keeping skills, because they're going to ask you for tons and tons of information that they want you to provide. They want you to answer a bunch of questionnaires, and they want you to send them a lot of corporate documents. If you don't have your records in order, it's going to be a very, very big lift to satisfy those lender requirements, just so that you can get ready for it before you even call them. That was the point of this brief presentation. I hope that's helpful. Thank you. Bye.